Hi everyone, Tea Drinker here, and today I'm reacting to Grave of the Fireflies. If you would like to see the full reaction to this and every film I've watched so far, get early access to my next reaction, which will be Akira, and vote on a monthly community film, you can get all that for just $1 a month, joining the Patreon link in the description down below. So I've seen a decent amount of Studio Ghibli movies at this point. Princess Mononoke is actually one of my all-time favourite movies ever, so I'm interested to see this. And I'm going to put the glasses on. I did technically see it 14 years ago, but I was way too young to appreciate it, and I remember nothing. He's looking at himself, I take it, from that night. Oh no, beforehand. That's so awful. Oh, so maybe this is the aftermath of the bombing, when this is happening. Like, I do remember that the movie is about the bombing, but that's pretty much it. Another one. This is something valuable, I wonder. It's very interesting how this has just been one wide shot for several moments. And those are the Fireflies. Like with that wide shot I just mentioned, you already get the sense that this is going to be deliberately paced, which I like. Even that title, Grave of the Fireflies, like fireflies representing the dead youth, is very, very powerful. God, and look at all this red that's coming on the screen as well. That's just so fantastic. Usually associate Ghibli movies with like a whole spectrum of colors, so to get something more monochromatic I think is very, very interesting. I do remember the movie having a tragic ending, so I'm wondering, is this a flashback, or are these ghosts we're looking at? Separated from the family. Oh yes, brother and sister. Right. She's so cute. Oh. Oh. Watching all of this in an era of what's happening in Palestine is not lost on me. That's horrifying. That's really horrifying. Oh, oh. Okay, I was a bit worried for a second. How terrifying must it be to see one's home destroyed? So I'm thinking with our introductory scene, that was the two of them as ghosts looking at his body die. Oh, this is so interesting how it's quite minimal with regards to the characterization so far. Oh god, looking at the shivering face is just done too well. The screaming of the pets in the background as well, as a reference point. It's also not lost to me how that red sky is matching what we saw during those intro credits of that color palette. Oh. In anything else I would be totally endeared by this, but I mean, we know where it's going. God, you just get the sense that the filmmakers really are taking the subject matter just so seriously. That shot is phenomenal. Oh my god, that shot is phenomenal. Do you see that? It feels weird saying that shot is phenomenal in this kind of a story. But like, even to say this shot reminds me of Fallout 1 feels like inappropriate for the subject matter. Did our house burn down? God, Jesus Christ. Like, the actual environment and how that affects all of them is being portrayed so well. Do you know what I mean? Like, all the tiny details of, like, the leaves going by. They are just so laser focused on depicting exactly what would have happened and nothing else. That's considerably more blood I'm used to seeing in a Ghibli movie. Oh, please don't tell me she passed away. Oh, God. Jesus Christ, this is her. You can only imagine the type of pain they're going through.
お母ちゃん心臓悪いんですけど、その薬もらえませんか？
ああ、聞いてみような。
Can you imagine how doctors must feel in this situation to just be constantly staring at so much death, so much more than they ever prepared for? That shot is stunning.
お母ちゃんちょっと気悪いね。時期用なるよってな。
They're doing such a fantastic job with all this, just the maturity level is not lost on me. It's interesting to see an anime film that's just so not an anime film, if you know what I mean. I don't mean that in any sort of pejorative sense towards anime film, obviously. Jesus, this is brilliant. What I mean is that it's so reminiscent of the likes of, let's say, 60s or 70s era Japanese cinema, if not maybe even earlier than that. Like this entire sequence right now, just how long they're drawing it out is just... Oh my god, I love it so much. Jesus fucking Christ. I can understand why contemporary viewers might be put off by this movie with the directorial style.
妹さんどないしたんや。
西宮の遠い親戚に今朝預けてきました。
It may come across as very archaic compared to modern day standards, but for me it truly is a breath of fresh air and it's really inspiring me to get into older Japanese cinema. This red train of death is such a strong visual metaphor. And music as well is just so powerful. How can he say it to her? God. Jesus. The film is doing so much of what it isn't saying, which is having such an effect on me. Every single time this film is being sentimental, it doesn't come across as it being sentimental, it's just doing what would actually happen for these characters. And what has happened for these characters, because of course it's based on real life. Jesus. Just the contrast of this landscape compared to the very beginning of the film where we saw him putting it underground. All these things that we take for granted in peaceful times. Is he going to give? Is he going to? Oh. I'm happy to see her happy. Oh. And here we have the Fireflies. Wow. That's really stunning. Again, I think using something like Fireflies is a very strong visual metaphor for the film. Like, very literally the combination of light and life represented with the Fireflies. And also, like, the light of the Fireflies having, like, this sense of wonder to them as well. Having the film spend so much time focusing on the good aspects of their life, again, is doing so much. That idea of what you're able to say with silence, what you're able to do through implication. How can you think about school? And to be on the front lines for the war effort, just seeing things continuously getting worse. The voice actor is doing an incredible job here. Someone can tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming every cell of this would have been hand-painted, correct? Given the year that it was produced, I'm assuming all of it was hand-drawn. I think for the film to focus on landscapes so much, again, is very, very strong. It just really is so classic cinema in style. They get the physicality of a child very, very well, I think. The rashes on her body. In any other film, I'd be enthralled with a scene like this, but you just know exactly what's underlying it all. It's so poignant how these characters are continuously looking for joy in this kind of a world. Oh, God, I didn't even notice him there. Jesus Christ. But I'll get hungry if I swim. The subtle amount of red light they had backlighting her was a nice touch as well. The character of the aunt who has to be practical and stoic and just get through things. Just to reiterate, I can understand why contemporary viewers might be put off by something so minimal in plot. But this older style of cinema is just suiting me so well, and I definitely want to watch more. And knowing that even if she were to grow up, she's going to grow up with only the faintest memory of her mother. If even that. Again, them having to grow up so fast, and coming up against her stoicism. It's just hell. You look at this landscape and it is just hell they reside in. As always with a Ghibli movie, I just gotta give a shout out to the sound design. God, what a fabulous shot. Again, I think showing the personality of the ant is a very interesting touch for this kind of movie. You know, showing how that kind of interpersonal squabbles can still exist in times of actual war. Seeing the continual process of how their resources are slowly dissipating. It's just not lost on me at all that the film is very deliberately trying to represent the slow death of these characters. And the amount of emotional resolve that Seita is having as a character, I can't believe I haven't even mentioned that yet, oh my god. The maturity that he exhibits the whole way through this, it's just heartbreaking. How did we know it was going to happen again? Very interesting plot point. Not a care in the world for them. I think it's so clever from a writing point of view how interpersonal conflict was the reason they had to leave for the caves. Something so normal and everyday as a family squabble only is taking place in this type of environment. I simply can't wrap my head around how strong a person would have to be to live in these kind of conditions, let alone a child. Wow, that sunset. I'd say it was well over 15 years ago when I first saw this film, and I was not mature enough for it at all. I was gonna say that earlier, how the planes, when they're on the beach, how the planes flying over the beach could be juxtaposed with fireflies. God, what a stunning metaphor for the film, truly. I can't get over it. So much about childhood and wonderment and hope is just represented through the firefly. Yeah, how hollow all those ideas are. Like, for children to wrap their heads around the idea of their father being part of the war effort. Like, just a conflation of, like, paternal love with military safety. God, so much foreboding in seeing that firefly drop. Incredible. Just incredible. God, the amount of strength his character has. That line is so earned by the movie. It does not come across as sentimental at all. Sentimental in a pejorative sense, that is. It is sentimental, but not melodramatic, if you know what I mean. If you even think of causing trouble, I swear to God you can fuck off. They really represent the rock and hard place that the two kids are in so well. Like, of course, from the outside in, you could say it's just easier to live with your aunt, but come on. Yep. Immediate consequences. Oh. Just for that to even be presented as a looming threat is just so awful. I think for them to present a story like this as part of a coming-of-age genre is very, very strong. Oh.
この野郎勘弁してください
これは何やこないなちっこい今まで掘り腐って
すいません勘弁してくださいもうしませんよってに
すんませんで済むのやったら警察はいらんわい
Just no compassion whatsoever. And it's so interesting to consider the characters of the ant and the farmer. How much of their characterization is because they're bad people, or they're just hardened through everything that's happened to them.
節子
Just devastated. Just absolutely devastated through war. And it never ends. It's very clever of him.
今日のかぼちゃうまいで見てみ
She's gonna be seriously sick, isn't she?
さあ兄ちゃん食わしたらさかい
She's dying, isn't she? Just the implication that she isn't sleeping peacefully. She's that just out of it. I'm just so nervous for what state this sister is going to be in. This is all drawn out way too much. Oh, no. I know what's gonna happen.
お母ちゃんの形見やてこれがアホこんな安物のペラペラがなんで形見やねんええ加減にしとき
節子節子
Yep. I'll look it up afterwards, but I'm assuming it was dysentery. Ugh.
で栄養失調から来る衰弱ですな。
Mm-hmm.
何か薬とか注射とか
No, what she needs is food, and
とにかく何か手当てしてください
薬を飲む。
yeah.
ま、需要をつけることですな。
Just a desperation. God, just even hearing her voice is so chilling. Their characterization of the child is just absolutely perfect.
どこへも行かへん
It's hell. It's hell they're living in. And given the fact that I come from a country with a history of the famine, or the genocide rather, it's not lost on me.
そんならお父ちゃん巡洋艦も沈んでしもたんかそれで返事も来らんなんかそんなことわしが知るかよお父ちゃんだほ
No sense of love or safety. This is what I was talking about, the conflation of the paternal safety with the militaristic safety.
お父ちゃん
And that's all his father is, just a picture. This has got to be one of the best microcosmic depictions of warfare that I've seen in a very long time.
今白いおかゆさん炊いてあるさかいな
Oh.
節子何舐めとるんやこれおはじきやろドロップちゃうやんか
Her not even being able to tell the difference between the two. Not just as a child, but for what she's going through. Oh, for God's sake. Oh my God, as an Irish person, that is hitting so close to home. Jesus Christ.
ほらスイカや
Oishi da yo.
待っててやすぐ卵入りのお客さん作るさかい節子は
Mm-hmm.
そのまま目を覚まさなかった
I've the vaguest memory of him walking with her body attached to his back, but that could be a false memory. Seeing the ribcage is way too much.
子供さんやったらお寺の炭など借りて焼かせてもらいやけど電気やな
How normalized this is for all the adults.
久しぶりやわ蓄音機
And for the people with wealth listening to the music through the gramophone and how that's juxtaposed with us hearing music earlier. The coldness that the children are being shown by the adults in this film, I'm curious as to how much of that is representation of culture. How much of that may have stemmed from how shameful it is to view people that low compared to you as people. I do not like blood. In any context. Oh. Okay. I genuinely have no recollection of any scene from this movie, even though I saw it 14 years prior. More than 14. And of course, the Fireflies would then come.
翌朝僕は宝石のかけらのような節子の骨をドロップの缶に収めて山を降り
And that's what was in the drops tin at the very beginning when it was discovered. That's so interesting, looking at their spirits looking at the industrialized Japan. How the past is just imbued with the contemporary. Wow. What an incredible shot to end on. I just rewatched those final lines there, just the final 30 minutes to get those final lines again. It's late now, let's go to sleep. And then staring at the industrialized contemporary city. And then you're left to wonder as to whether or not those spirits, if that is truly where the spirits have found their peace, or if they're going to continue as part of the spiritual landscape of Japan. So that's pretty much my reaction for Grave of the Fireflies. A fantastic film and incredibly sad for reasons that are so different from A Silent Voice in Your Name. I would like to leave it there for the reaction, and thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate you taking the time to watch me react to this film. And now here is the review. Grave of the Fireflies is a 1988 movie from the Studio Ghibli production company, and it is directed by Isao Takahata. It is the third film that Studio Ghibli released across their immense filmography, and from what I understand, it was a moderate success within the Japanese box office, but it has now gone on to gain critical acclaim as one of the greatest animated war films of all time, and in a lot of ways one of just the best war films ever. It is a film that I would describe as, of course, it is very much a drama and a character study, but I wouldn't actually necessarily say it's a character study so much as it is a coming-of-age story, albeit one that is more minimal in characterization and, of course, very, very tragic for these lead characters. I've said pretty much most of what I want to say about my reaction to the film itself. Just with regards to the general points, I suppose I want to get a little bit more into my own personal reaction towards this kind of film, what I think about these kind of films. To start us off, I gotta say that I do truly think they did a phenomenal job with depicting this kind of story. From reading through what was said on the Wikipedia page, there was, a lot of what the director was saying is that he doesn't necessarily consider this to be an anti-war film, which is a very nuanced point in the sense that the film to him is more about depicting societal ostracization that the two characters of Seita and Sukeiko, oh, pardon me, I got that name wrong. I'm going to refer to them as a boy and a girl rather than looking it up again. It has been a little bit of time since I watched the film. But with the boy and the girl going through this environment where they're continuously being shut out by those surrounding them and they are left to fend for themselves, the director was trying to create something that created a character portrait of that level of, again, just social seclusion and the fallout from that, rather than doing something that is specifically, this is about the war. Because yes, of course, you could say so much of this movie is anti-war, but given the fact that you also have the lead character who still shows nationalist tendencies, and of course you have the character of the aunt who is then a juxtaposition of that, one could, if they wanted to, make the inference that this isn't so much as an anti-war so much as it is about the fallout of when war goes bad, but war itself is still good if we're fighting the good fights. So I can understand why it would be interpretive in that kind of a sense, but nonetheless, I think that the vast majority of people who watch this and who hopefully have a degree of empathy towards two orphan children will walk away from seeing the devastation that war has caused. When I was looking up a little bit more information about the film, it got particular praise from Roger Ebert, who noted that the landscapes, just how thoroughly depicted those landscapes are and how reminiscent they are of an older style of Japanese animation and just an older art style of art, generally speaking, how that's juxtaposed with the way the characters are drawn, where it's very, very traditional anime style, traditional for a time, just about to go into the 90s. He said something along the lines of, I believe, though the children have eyes like saucers, this is undoubtedly one of the greatest war films ever made, which for someone from Roger Ebert's caliber to say something like that is certainly high praise indeed. But suffice it to say, this ultimately comes back to what I think about the film, how I responded to it, and how I view it within the lexicon, within the canon of war cinema. And I think that what allows the film to really carve out a niche for its own is the fact that within the animation genre, you do get the leaning towards impressionism that is just naturally going to be there in opposition to live action. You get this impressionist depiction of human lives, but from a writing point of view, everything is so laser focused. Everything is anchored down to how are these kids feeling and how are these kids secluded from their everyday world, and it pretty much stays like that. Plot-wise, there isn't anything that is done within the 90-minute mark that couldn't have been done within a 60-minute mark, or indeed perhaps a 40-minute mark. But it's not that kind of a story. This isn't the type of story where a ball is kept rolling with regards to plot event, and then characters interacting with that and responding to it. It is very much a film that doesn't need that to happen, nor is it in any way interested in that. Case in point, look at the fact that this is a film that opens up with them explicitly telling us these characters are going to die by the end of the narrative. We know going into it that there is going to be heartbreak and that it is completely unavoidable. The director himself, from what I've read, said that he felt it was important to audiences that they would know going into it that it was going to break their hearts so they don't feel let down. And with this being a film that, if you can believe it, was marketed to kids alongside My Neighbor Totoro, both of them were released quite close to one another, you can understand why he would have the audience's preconceived notions and expectations in mind, as well as wanting to stay true to his vision of telling this tragic story. But be that as it may, I think that to tell this type of story for a Japanese audience is going to necessitate that level of foresight. It's going to necessitate a level of understanding that for as much as you want to hold the audience's hand, and for as much as you want to satiate them and make them feel safe, there is only so much you can do when it comes to this type of subject matter. And for me, from a narrative point of view, from a narrative exposition, just general storytelling point of view, knowing that everything we're seeing is going to end to one particular destination, it's going to have one endpoint that has already been drawn out for us, it doesn't in any way whatsoever take away from the movie-going experience for me, because the characterization has just been done so incredibly well here. You can tell that the writers and directors were just so focused on wanting to create a world, wanting to create an atmosphere, and presenting this idea of a tangible, lived experience for the characters within this story. And I think they just pulled it off very, very well. Everything from seeing how Seita has to rise to be like the man of the house, essentially. How the girl, forgive me for forgetting her name, Setsuko, I believe. How Setsuko, her characterization visually with her body language as well as the performance of the voice actor just could not have been better. Absolutely could not have been better. Like, they portrayed, you really see it, like, just for a child at that age where it's between being, you know, the fully formed cognizant child and towards toddler and then towards infant, and then you're seeing characterizations of all three of them throughout, was just stunning. And again, it makes you feel like, in the same way that the mind of a child is so unpredictable and so impossible to calm, how that juxtaposes with that of war and with that of the environment. And I mentioned it several times throughout the reaction itself, how I found the visual metaphor of Firefly to be so strong for a story like this. And it turns out that the kanji used in the film itself for Firefly places more of an emphasis on the idea of fire itself, which again goes to show the level of deliberation that went into the writing of this film. Outside of that, the one main thing that I kind of wanted to talk about, just very briefly, I did mention it in the reaction itself, was as the movie progressed and you started to see the story go down this route of showing us that the cause of death, that what signed the death sentence for these characters was malnutrition, was starvation, the fact that this is a historically based film, knowing that 100 years prior to these events happening in Japan, Ireland went through their genocide. We went through our genocide with our workers having our crops completely decimated through a blight, with the nation's people working on creating food for the British Crown, only for that food to then be sent away. We were literally creating food while starving ourselves, and we weren't allowed any of it. And knowing that Irish people were dying on roadsides with grass around their mouth, and having this entire lack of course, it's so much more than lack of empathy. It was outright genocide committed by the British Empire. Having that as part of a cultural trauma is something that is not lost on me when I'm looking at what happens in Japan. When I watch stuff like this, it makes me feel bad that, I mean, I will admit I have quite a surface level knowledge of my own country's history, let alone that of Japan. And when you watch stuff like this, you're forced to confront the past. And of course, you're forced to confront the present, in the sense that we're currently experiencing what was happening in Ukraine as well as what's happening in Palestine. So seeing these sort of depictions where it's unavoidably human is something that is always going to be important. And one would hope it's always going to be important merely as a means to an end of understanding the past. And one does not want to think about using films like these to understand the present, but unfortunately, this is the day and age we live within. Overall, I think that this is one of the strongest Studio Ghibli films I've seen for sure. I'm trying to remember which ones I've seen and remember well enough. Really, if I'm honest, like I said, Princess Mononoke is one of my all-time favorite movies, probably a top 5 film for me, across any genre and any medium. Spirited Away I did see a few years ago for a second time. A lot of the plot is spotty, but I do remember the gist of it, and the same would go for the likes of Howl's Moving Castle, which I thought was just a fantastic premise that you can't not fall in love with it. The likes of My Neighbor Totoro and Ponyo I have seen, but so long ago that it's unfair to me to say that I've really seen those films. So there's a lot for me from the Ghibli back catalogue that I would love to do for this channel, because the vast majority of them I have seen, the vast majority that I have seen have been on a long enough timeline that it would, for me, I'd go into it feeling fresh. Not that I would necessarily be against watching something that I've already seen more recently for a reaction channel. I think that reactions do tend to be better when I know absolutely nothing about a film. I think most people would agree with that sentiment. I was just thinking, something like Ghost in the Shell, which I saw about a year ago, is a film that is just so philosophically dense with the idea of transhumanism and just general existentialist philosophy that would perhaps be worth watching again. And I would be interested in rewatching the sequel, Innocence, as I watched as part of my college degree. Again, that's been so long ago that I really would be going into it with a fresh pair of eyes and ears. To tie this back to Grave of the Fireflies and to wrap it all up for this short review, I just want to say that this was a very moving piece. Moving not in the... If Your Name was very kind of surface level, these are the raw emotions anyone can feel, and then Silent Voice went more into the socio-political and the more underlying psychological type of trauma. Something like Grave of the Fireflies, where it's not only war drama, but based on true events, war drama, is just... It was not for lack of me being emotionally invested in these characters that I wasn't crying this time around. It's more a case of when stuff is so harrowing, you just end up becoming numb. And, I think of what was, to me, one of the best depictions of war in cinema and visual media, which was the Band of Brothers miniseries. And there are certain moments of that where you will tear up, but many more where one finds themselves just going completely numb to what's going on. I think that this is unfortunately, a very timeless movie for Studio Ghibli. I absolutely loved the mature approach to storytelling and the writing that they had here, just particularly the pacing of it and how much time they gave to the landscape and to the everyday events and to the characterization that happens amongst all of that. Definitely makes me want to watch, because I haven't seen a lot of old Japanese cinema, live action particularly. The likes of Ozu and the likes of Kurosawa, I'd be dying to see and react to on this channel. But be that as it may, I think that's where I'm going to leave it there. I want to thank you so much for watching this review as well as watching the reaction. I'm delighted that since my trip, I have now amassed over 150 subscribers, which is just nuts to me. And with this being the first video that I'm now putting up on the channel with the official launch of the Patreon, I'm really looking forward to seeing more of you come along to watch me watch more. And that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching.